The gilded halls of the Palatine Hill echoed with a silence that was both profound and deceptive, a carefully curated calm that masked the intricate machinery of corruption humming just beneath the surface. At its heart sat Empress Messalina, a vision of imperial grace, her fingers tracing the edge of a marble table laden with scrolls. To the public eye, she was the devoted young wife of the aging Emperor Claudius, a paragon of Roman virtue and maternal duty. But in the private, perfumed air of her chambers, she was an architect of ruin, a weaver of a vast and invisible web designed to ensnare the very soul of the city's elite. Her latest thread was about to be drawn taut. With a nod so slight it was almost imperceptible, she signaled a servant. Soon, the heavy oak door swung open to admit Livia, the wife of Senator Drusus. The woman moved with the hesitant steps of a startled bird, her fine silk stola seeming to weigh her down. Messalina's smile was a masterpiece of warmth, a weapon she wielded with lethal precision. She rose, the gold threads of her own gown catching the afternoon light, and extended her hands in a gesture of false kinship. She spoke of Livia's renowned beauty, her husband's promising career, the bright future that lay before their family, each compliment a silken noose. Then, with the gentle cadence of a trusted confidant, the Empress's tone shifted. The flattery began to curdle into implication, the friendly advice morphing into a stark ultimatum. She spoke of the imperial service, a patriotic duty that required the utmost discretion and sacrifice from Rome's most noble women. It was an honor, she purred, her eyes holding Livia's captive, to be chosen to strengthen the empire's alliances in such a personal, vital way. To refuse would be such a profound disappointment, a personal insult to the Empress herself, and the consequences for a senator's standing could be so unfortunate. As Livia stood frozen, her face a pale mask of dawning horror, Messalina casually unrolled a scroll on the table. It was not poetry or philosophy, but a cold, meticulous ledger. Names of women were listed in neat columns, followed by dates, times, and the names of powerful men, allies, diplomats, and rivals. Next to it lay a detailed schedule, a bureaucrat's record of depravity. This was not a den of vice, it was an office. The Empress's web was not spun from passion, but from calculation, each strand a piece of data, each victim a line item in her grand design for absolute control. The scent of foreign perfume and spiced wine clung to Livia's skin, a cloying, invasive aroma that seemed to seep into her very bones. She stood in the small, lamplit chamber provided for her use, her reflection in the polished bronze mirror a stranger's face. The woman who stared back was hollow-eyed, her carefully arranged hair slightly disheveled, the elegant gown she had been given now feeling like a prisoner's uniform. Her body was a numb, distant thing, a vessel that had been used and returned, its former occupant seemingly vanished. The memory of the foreign diplomat's hands, his guttural tongue, his proprietary gaze, it played behind her eyes on a relentless loop, each moment a fresh violation that systematically dismantled the person she had been. Livia, the respected matron, the wife of Senator Drusus, was gone. In her place remained only an imperial asset, a function to be performed, an identity erased by a single night of state-sanctioned horror. The next morning, she was summoned again to the Empress's presence. The atmosphere was jarringly different, a public reception filled with the glittering elite of Rome. Empress Messalina held court, a benevolent smile gracing her lips as she praised Livia before the assembled nobles for her exceptional service and profound dedication to the strength of the empire. The words were a public branding, a perverse medal of honor that felt heavier than chains. Livia stood rigid, a forced smile cracking her face as the court applauded politely, utterly oblivious to the truth behind the accolade. Her eyes briefly met those of her husband, who stood among the crowd, his own expression one of confused pride. The Empress's gaze, however, held a different message, a silent reminder of the ledger, of the consequences that awaited not just Livia, but her entire family, should that smile ever falter. Resistance meant political ruin, financial devastation, and social exile. Compliance was its own form of destruction, a slow death of the soul. As the reception concluded, Messalina drew a small group of similarly hollow-eyed women aside. Her tone shifted from public praise to intimate command. She spoke of a new initiative, a way to further demonstrate their loyalty and compete for the Empress's highest favor. She called them competitions, events where the most dedicated and resilient of her assets would have the opportunity to prove their worth. The words were draped in the language of games and glory, but the underlying promise was one of escalating degradation, a system designed to pit them against one another in a race to the bottom of their own humanity. Livia listened, the Empress's voice washing over her as she felt the last vestiges of her former self dissolve into the cold marble floor. The invitation to the Palatine was not an invitation at all, but a summons veiled in gold leaf and scented wax. It promised an unprecedented spectacle, a display of feminine prowess and imperial favor, and the elite of Rome arrived in a glittering, murmuring flood, their silks and jewels shimmering under the blaze of 1,000 oil lamps. The grand triclinium had been transformed. The dining couches were arranged in a wide semicircle facing a raised, cushioned platform, creating an intimate theater of voyeurism. The air was thick with the scent of roses and spiced wine, the atmosphere humming with a decadent, anticipatory energy. Senators reclined beside their wives, financiers beside courtiers, all united by a shared, desensitized curiosity for whatever new diversion the young empress had concocted. At the center of it all, Empress Messalina rose, her presence commanding an instant, sycophantic silence. She spoke of strength, of endurance, of the unique power of womanhood to serve and sustain the empire. Her words were a masterful perversion of virtue, twisting patriotism into perversion. Then she unveiled the contest. On one side of the platform stood a group of women from the city's most infamous brothels, professional and hardened, their expressions a mixture of boredom and cynical amusement. On the other stood Livia and several other noblewomen, their faces pale, their postures rigid with shame. They were to be pitted against each other in a test of endurance, a competition to see who could service the most clients consecutively without yielding. The crowd's initial shock quickly melted into a low, excited buzz, the taboo of the spectacle instantly overriding any lingering morality. The first participants were led forward, the noblewomen moving like sleepwalkers to their assigned cushions. The humiliation was methodical, a public unmaking. The crowd's amusement was not raucous, but a low, constant murmur of conversation and laughter, as if they were watching a particularly clever mime or an exotic animal act. They placed bets, discussed form, and sipped their wine, their humanity cauterized by the sheer, bizarre normalcy Messalina had imposed upon the scene. And then, as the competition reached its peak, the Empress herself descended from her throne. A wave of astonished delight swept through the audience. Shedding her elaborate palla to reveal a simple, sheer shift beneath, Messalina took her place upon the platform, not as a ruler but as a contestant. Her participation was the final, devastating stroke, erasing the line between master and slave, between empress and whore, and binding every witness as a complicit participant in her glorious, degrading game. The final tally was announced to thunderous, drunken applause that shook the gilded triclinium. 25. The number hung in the incense-heavy air, a testament not to passion, but to cold, brutal endurance. Empress Messalina, her shift damp with sweat, her hair loosened from its elegant coils, accepted the victory with the regal nod of a conquering general. A wreath of gold laurels was placed upon her brow, a grotesque parody of a triumphal crown. The crowd roared its approval, their cheers not for an athlete or a warrior, but for the ultimate symbol of their own moral surrender. In that moment, any last pretense of scandal or shame was extinguished. The exploitation was not merely normalized, it was celebrated, enshrined as imperial spectacle. Messalina's control was now absolute, woven into the very fabric of their entertainment, and every cheering aristocrat was a thread in her web. Later, in the quiet of her chambers, the true prize was counted. Scribes presented her with the detailed records of the evening, not just the final numbers, but names, durations, and the specific preferences of every powerful man who had participated. These parchments were more valuable than any tribute from conquered nations. They were maps of vulnerability, a comprehensive guide to the secret shames of Rome's elite. Messalina's fingers, now clean and perfumed, traced the columns of text with possessive satisfaction. This senator preferred certain degradations. That financier had whispered treasonous complaints in a moment of unguarded passion. Each entry was a hook, a lever of future manipulation. The games were not an end, but a means of data collection on an industrial scale, ensuring that blackmail and political coercion could be executed with surgical precision for years to come. While the Empress plotted with her ledgers, Livia was escorted from the hall, a hollow shell guided by unseen hands. She did not return to the world of senators' villas and social calls. Her family, shamed and bewildered by her very existence, quietly moved her to a secluded country estate, a beautiful prison far from the noise of Rome. There she retreated into a profound silence, a complete psychological breakdown from which she would never emerge. She would spend her days staring blankly at garden walls, her spirit broken, her identity erased. She became a ghost, a living monument to the cost of the Empress's victory, a forgotten victim in a city that had already turned the page, eager for the next game.